All right, good evening. Tonight we have John Rawl going to speak to us about the old Salem Cemetery. And if any of y'all know me very well, you know that I've already been there, probably more than 10 times. But he's going to speak on that and that whole area right there in East Madison County. John?
Thank you, David, and thank you all, or as I should say, thank y'all. Since I have had a career of what y'all were for about 20 years, I better thank you. This is impressive. Nobody told me we were going to have a sellout crowd. Surprise, as Gomer would say, surprise, surprise. I'm impressed so much, if you don't mind, I'm kind of one of those youngsters. This is worthy of a selfie. So if you don't mind, we got to get a selfie. All right. I know y'all know what selfies are.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I have a couple brochures left. Anybody did not get one? We're selling these for $1,000. Everybody got one?
Right here.
Sorry. I don't want to leave anybody out. Collector's items. Well, thank you again for the incredible honor to speak here. This is actually my first invitation to speak as executive director in front of a group here locally. John Rawl again is my name, and let me first thank two important people here, the Cox boys. First of all, I want to thank the late Malcolm Wilcox. I'm sure many of you knew him. I never had a chance to meet Malcolm Wilcox, but he passed away a few years ago, and I know he put a lot of heart, soul, sweat, and a lot of energy into Salem Cemetery. So thank you, Malcolm Wilcox. The other Cox boy I want to thank is Dr. Charles Cox, who, just like Malcolm, has spent a long time working on Salem Cemetery. And through his effort, I was able to come aboard as the executive director, and I thank him and all the other volunteers that we've had through the years. What I want to do now is tell you a little bit about Salem Cemetery, and more importantly, what we're trying to do for the future of this important historic aspect of Madison County. I'm sure because you're in here, you have a little bit of an interest in history. I hope all of you know about Salem Cemetery. If you don't, that's why we're here, to bring Salem Cemetery into the forefront and make it something where people go, oh yeah, I know what that is. First of all, Salem Cemetery is the second oldest cemetery in Madison County. As you probably well know, the Cotton Grove area was one of the earliest settlements in Madison County. And we had a great celebration a couple of months ago out at Brown's Church in recognition of Cotton Grove, the Brown's Church community and all that. So I'm sure some of you saw our table out there at that. So we have this historic part of Madison County. The old cemetery was a Methodist campground, church ground, which I'm not Methodist, but I think the Methodists often have like a retreat type area, and that's what that was, and that's why the cemetery is there. And of course, some of the earliest families of Madison County buried at Salem Cemetery. If you look in the brochure, we have arguably one of our famous early settlers who was a part of that community, and that's Dr. William Butler. And he's not buried there, but he essentially was one of the first people to settle in that area. And he's the father of Jackson, Tennessee. Dr. William Butler, of course, he fought alongside Andrew Jackson, Old Hickory. And when this area opened up in the 1820s, he found himself here in Madison County and was a big part of that early community of Cotton Grove Road as we know it today. Now, of course, one of the arguably most famous person buried at Salem Cemetery is the peg-leg politician. And if not for Jackson, Tennessee, there would be no Texas. Is that right? That's right. And that's all because of a guy named Adam Huntsman, the peg-leg politician. And of course, his burial is out at Salem Cemetery, and that's pictured on the brochure if you have that. And of course, this was a very important person in early Tennessee politics, and a guy named Crockett lost to him and took off to Texas. But of course, Huntsman there, and that nice property, of course, there's the home that's been built on where Huntsman lived on Cotton Grove Road that we understand that may be turned into a bed and breakfast one day, but that'd be a great addition. That's not on what we're here today. That's not on our property that I'm here to talk about. But you had this cemetery and some of the early families buried at Salem Cemetery, and one of the other families that's also buried inside the cemetery is the Jones family. And you're raising your hand. You must be a Jones descendant. Now, the most famous of the Joneses, arguably, is not buried there. His wives, I think plural, are buried there. But he's actually buried in Texas because he went and fought in the Texas War for Independence in the 1840s, 30s, 40s, whenever that was. And then ended up coming back and fighting in the Confederate Army at Shiloh and beyond. But the interesting part of that is this Jones went to West Point, and his roommate at West Point was a struggling writer named Edgar Allan Poe. And so there's a connection to Jackson, Tennessee with Edgar Allan Poe. Who knew? But yes, but that's one of the key families there inside Salem Cemetery. So you raised your hand. That's awesome. Who all here has descendants in Salem Cemetery? Or you're the descendant of someone from Salem, buried in Salem? Do we know of anybody else? You're the lone person. All right. Well, thank you. So the cemetery was there, and then something in 1861 happened called the War for Southern Independence, the Civil War, Mr. Lincoln's War, War of Northern Aggression, the Confederate War. You pick your word, but it happened. And Tennessee joined in the effort as the 13th state to do so in 1861. 1861, of course, not a lot of battles right through here. 1862, though, you had Shiloh in April of 1862. And then Jackson, of course, ends up being taken over in the summer of 1862. And then Corinth, there was a battle in Corinth later in the year. The Northern Army was here. General Ulysses S. Grant had troops here. He was here. And this was essentially a railroad town, as it is, it was certainly in 1862 a railroad town. And things were not going well for the Confederate forces in 1862. So a plan was devised to try to do something to keep the Northern Army from heading down to the Gibraltar of the Confederacy, AKA Vicksburg. So the plan was devised to raid West Tennessee and raid North Mississippi. And so what happened was, at the end of 1862, to kind of take the heat off of the northern advance on Vicksburg, that a lot of hell and destruction would be brought on this part of the world, and that's what happened. So in December 1862, Confederate forces under Nathan Bedford Forrest crossed the Tennessee River at Clifton and came into West Tennessee, and they were not spotted. I mean, it was amazing what they did. If you've ever been down to Clifton, they have markers and everything. How they got a whole cavalry force across that Tennessee River in the middle of winter is unbelievable. But they did that, and then they came in. Of course, if you know about the order of battle, they had a battle at Lexington. And then on December 19th, 1862, you had what's called the Battle of Jackson, also known as the Battle of Salem Cemetery. And I have a map, I only printed a handful, but I've got a map that some of you may be able to reference here. But this is the map of the battle on that early morning of December 1862. And what happened was the Confederates had a rousing victory at Lexington, and they were able to capture Cannon. It was a great day for the boys in gray. But their whole objective was to just keep tearing things up. And so there were a lot of forces here in Jackson, and the Union forces assumed that the Confederates would be coming to Jackson next. That's what Nathan Bedford Forrest wanted them to think. So they camped out on Cotton Grove Road. There's a sign that indicates where they encamped that cold night. It was a very cold night, December 18th of 1862. The Northern troops needed to get more soldiers up here. So the call was made, and down in Bolivar, hundreds of Northern troops came to Jackson, and they got off their railroad at Royal Street, the depot at Royal Street, and marched from downtown Jackson out toward Salem Cemetery. And they encamped there, and they kept quiet, and they didn't build fires, and they didn't have proper clothing either, the Northern troops, of which to their credit, they're listed here on this map. You've got Illinois, Ohio, and I think Indiana represented, maybe even Tennessee there. They camped out, kept it quiet, hoping for a surprise if the Confederates did advance, which is what happened. Early morning, December 19th comes, sunrise, and the Confederates advance on Jackson down Old Cotton Grove Road. And as soon as they turned the corner, the Confederates, the lead of which was on a white horse, was met with a volley of northern lead. And we don't know the exact numbers, but there were lots of people killed, as you would assume, as this volley of rifle fire from virtually the 500 northern troops were all ready to fire, sitting there waiting when the Confederate cavalry, this is all cavalry by the way, comes down Old Cotton Grove Road and are met with fire. And there was a battle that ensued. The Confederates had artillery that was placed on the outskirts under the direction of Captain Morton. And so he returned fire. This was a bloody battle. This is not Shiloh. There weren't thousands and thousands of soldiers fighting. There was roughly 500 cavalry for the Confederates and about 500 northern troops, all positioned in the way that you see them here. And this was a battle that we should recognize, and it is recognized as the Battle of Jackson, the Battle of Salem Cemetery. What happened was that there was such a large federal force there, the Confederates did not advance. But did they really want to advance? That's the question. And evidently they did not want to advance. What this was a feint. This was an attempt by Nathan Bedford Forrest to think that they were advancing on Jackson to attack Jackson, this entire 2,000 cavalry force that the Confederates had. But in reality, it was a trick. And it kept all the northern troops positioned in Jackson, where actually General Forrest went around the north side of Jackson and started tearing up railroad tracks on the north end of Jackson and north end of Madison County. Ultimately, they really caused a lot of destruction around Trenton and other places through that corridor for the next day or two. It was a very costly day. In fact, the exact same time the CSA was tearing up Jackson and this area, the railroad tracks and depots and stuff, they were doing the same thing in Holly Springs, Mississippi. General Van Dorn, lover boy as I call him, because he would ultimately get killed, not by a northern bullet, but by the husband of a woman he was messing around with in Spring Hill, Tennessee. And the guy got away with it. He shot him in the back of the head. Never was problem. And he was actually a state legislator too. So maybe that was the key. But Van Dorn really rocked Holly Springs while Forrest troops were doing what they were doing here. And it worked. They caused, what was the exact amount? Was it, the damage was untold, the amount. I forgot what the equivalent was of today's standard, but it was $3 million. $3 million at that time, I think. And a lot of money, Confederate or Yankee money. So what it did was it really did stall the northern advance on Vicksburg, but not long, because they had more troops, more money, and they ultimately found their way to the Gibraltar of the Confederacy. But what it did was give the Confederates a little bit more time. And this battle here, again, fought December 19th, 1862. The Confederates would ultimately, again, go north of Jackson, wind their way back, and they needed to get back across that river. And that's what they ultimately did, but not before a place called Parker's Crossroads happened. So on New Year's Eve of 1863, so technically December 31st, 1862, some 10 days after this battle, you had Nathan Bedford Forrest's his forces essentially surrounded at Parker's Crossroads. And what did he do? He attacked in multiple directions, I heard people say it. And he got away from Parker's Crossroads with a lot of goods, and his raid was successful. But the war, of course, carried on for several more years. That's this battle. It's important that we remember it and we tell the story. That's what we're doing. Of course, there's more to this property than this Civil War battle. You got the history before, what happened with the Cotton Grove community before, during the war, afterwards, and what we have out there today. I mean, frankly, it's kind of amazing that since we're celebrating the 200th anniversary, thank you, Elaine, for all your great work. 200 years, and there's not too much difference I wasn't around in 1822, but I don't think there's too much difference on that road now versus when the settlers were first there. We're really fortunate that that road is essentially the same pathway that it was, and we don't have skyscrapers up and down Cotton Grove Road, and you can visualize what it was like during that time period. So we have the historic property, and it's so fortunate that we kind of have it in the way that it was. What can we do about it? Well, that's why I'm here, because what happened was this was a site that has kind of not been properly recognized throughout the 150 years after the Civil War. It's a site that historians may know about, but the general public doesn't know much. There's around 30 people in this room right now. Is there anyone here that really didn't even know there was a Civil War battle in Jackson? Raise your hand. Okay, y'all knew, that's good. I'm hoping half of you'd say, no, I didn't know there was anything else. Surprise, surprise, there we go again. So what happened was a group called the American Battlefield Trust, who do wonderful work, they buy properties throughout the country and preserve them. And so they knew about, according to the official records of the Civil War, they call this the Battle of Jackson. Yeah, we got that town in Mississippi beat. We're the Battle of Jackson. And they had this site here as a place that needed to be preserved. Thank you, American Battlefield Trust. So really, through the good fortunes, if you will, they went and bought this land somehow, some way, thank goodness, a couple of years ago. And this American Battlefield Trust bought 125 acres. Wow. On this side of, that's what's in yellow on this map. The yellow is the purchase made by the American Battlefield Trust. 125 acres. Now, for a long time, Dr. Cox here is like, boy, I wish we could just get an acre out here and help preserve this thing. And honestly, kudos to the county. For a long time, Madison County has gone out there and maintained Salem Cemetery. So thank you. Our tax dollars are actually doing something good. In this case, they maintain that cemetery. But Dr. Cox and Malcolm Wilcox, again, through the years have gone out there and put memorials, kind of kept this story going. And he wanted to do more, and really a curveball to even Dr. Cox. This American Battlefield Trust comes in and buys 125 acres. Thank you. But what they do is they buy the land, but they want to have a partner. So the American Battlefield Trust, they want the partner to be the state of Tennessee. And the case study for this is Parker's Crossroads. Parker's Crossroads is exactly what the Friends of Salem Cemetery Historic Site, of which I represent, is trying to facsimile. We want to be exactly like them. In fact, they've given the same notes they've used for all these years to us. Even some of their key board members are on our board. American Battlefield Trust buys the land. They will deed the land to the state of Tennessee. But the state of Tennessee doesn't want that deed until there's a local partner in place that will help with insurance, security, and just kind of keeping it up. And that's what we've been working on for quite some time. And fingers crossed, we're just days away from hopefully, I don't know if we have any members of the commission here, the Madison County Commission will approve us as a county park. It will be a county park that the state of Tennessee technically owns, but the county, Madison County, will administer. It'll be a very good agreement. Same thing they got at Parker's Crossroads, and in Fayetteville, Tennessee, there's a similar battle site for the War of 1812, a campsite actually over there for that. So that's what we're hopeful for, that Madison County will give us the green light and make this a reality. And within weeks, hopefully that will happen. And then within months, we can open this thing up. Again, 125 acres. As your brochure says, this will have a great interpretation of the battle, of the history of the area. But if nothing else, we're going to have walkways. You can go out there and walk a canine, you can walk a cat, you can go out there and just see the great environment that we have here in Madison County, and it'll be a great addition to that part of Madison County for those who live in that area. But it's a destination spot. As we have, I've known for a long time, there's been times, it's not still the case, COVID kind of messed a lot of things up. For a long time, Shiloh was the #1 tourist attraction in the state of Tennessee. even over that guy in Memphis's his house down there. And so Civil War tourism, heritage tourism, draws in a lot of people. And we want to have Jackson, and specifically in our case, Salem Cemetery, be the epicenter of West Tennessee tourism, not because we're more important, but because we're the biggest city. We're the, hub city. And so when you come to learn at Shiloh, Parker's Crossroads, those two great places are great places for tourism, but not exactly the greatest places for accommodations and food and fun and all that. We have that here in Jackson. So what we want to do is be the hub city for Civil War and historic tourism, and draw people to those places while checking out what we got here. But again, if you could care less about history, we've got a good place to go out there and have fun and enjoy nature and get to see a very important part of Madison County. And we hope through our group will be sort of like the companion piece to the county and the state. We will be the ones out doing the fundraising, coming to speak in events like this, which next time I think we'll probably have twice this amount, if not threefold. And so we want to do what we need to do to drive people to know it exists, that they have that as an option to enjoy and learn from history. So that's where we're going. Hopefully, again, we'll be approved soon. And it has been a pleasure to talk to you. And I will be happy to answer any questions. And Dr. Charles Cox is here as well. And it is just great to see people interested in genealogy and history. And who knows, I might even be related to half of y'all. And that's a good thing. But Ricky and David, thank y'all both for letting me come out. And by the way, congratulations on your gig. Because I'm happy about my gig, but we got a lot of gigs going on here. Yes, sir.
Question, John. I'm in the SAR chapter here, Sons of the American Revolution.
Yes.
You know, I think there's some Revolutionary War patriots buried there. Do you know for sure if there are?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. I didn't know if there are or not, but even if they're not, we need to get you to speak to our SAR.
Sign me up. I got my agent right here. Now, I will tell you, I do not claim to be the absolute authority on the history of everything, including who's buried out there. I haven't seen anybody, but you got somebody right behind you that might know more than I do.
There's a
Evelyn,
grave cemetery.
do you know of a Revolutionary War veteran?
I don't know of anyone, researching revolution in Old Salem. That's, bears checking.
I mean, I don't know of any in the whole county. Do we have any? We do?
Off of Cotton Grove Road,
Okay.
but
That's the
close
one I
to
was
Church Well.
Okay.
Okay, so he's not actually.
On private land.
Okay.
Who's that? Jonas Park.
Well, I still think I heard what you're from you.
I'd love to talk. I don't have a problem talking.
There's a find a grave for
There's a what?
A virtual cemetery and find a grave for that cemetery. So you can look that up and see
Okay.
if it's buried there.
There's a Find a Grave group for the Revolutionary War, Jonas.
For everybody in
Oh.
that grave.
Okay.
In that cemetery.
Okay, Salem Cemetery? Okay. But what about the cemetery he's talking about with the Revolutionary War?
That's just one person, just that person and his family buried
Okay.
together on private property.
Okay. Great, yes.
Well, I just want to thank you for your presentation. You did an excellent job, and I want to give a shout out to Charles because he has been so dedicated to this cause and how important it is to preserve our history. And that's where it all started for Madison County, and I think we found that out when we were doing the Brown's Church and Cotton Grove Road celebration for the bicentennial. But it's just so encouraging the work that's happened and to be able to preserve this land. I'm just really proud of you both and wanted to thank you.
Thank you. I hope y'all know Elaine, she's the chairman of the 201st Commission.
We're used to seeing Elaine usually behind the podium. First time she's got to sit down in the audience in several years, isn't it?
Yeah.
John, do you have any specific plans once this does come to fruition?
We have plans. We just kind of just, our biggest thing right now is not trying to rock, not that we would, but we're just kind of hoping this thing hurries on along. Because one of my jobs is going to be to fundraise, and I've got to get grant requests in. And unfortunately, most grant requests are kind of due like right now for next year. And we're not official yet. We're still courting. We want to make this thing official.
Sure.
And so I don't think we're going to be official for at least another month. But when that happens, we get to be officially part of the county. We can go out and raise money officially and get grant request in. And it all comes down to awareness and talking and letting people know that this is a good thing. I mean, we know that Civil War sites are around here, and they're a good thing. It's nothing to run from. We're proud of our history. And everybody's got a history to tell, and we have that right here in Madison County, not only with Salem Cemetery, but Britton Lane as well. And that's what we're hoping to tie in all of this, have a heritage tourism, as I said.
Will parking be on Cotton Grove Road or around the corner on the?
That is a great question. She asked about parking because, boy, that is a scary road. No offense to anybody that goes up and down it, but it's scary. And so what we hope to do, because we have the luxury on that map, if you see 125 acres, we're already talking about how we're going to pull this thing off to have a safe place to go. And the Browns Church, that's our neighbor there, like, man, we're pulling for y'all because they want a parking lot. And I don't blame them because they've had a couple of wrecks, you know, coming out of that church right there. And so I don't know if anybody's an engineer around here, but I think we can pull off maybe a parking lot back behind there somehow without disturbing the, you know, if you come out of the park, the city park, that's actually across the road is part of this land. The city park up there going out of Parkway. And so you actually can have an entrance there. I don't know, those are the fun things we can figure out. But the one thing I will say is that this is going to be owned by the state of Tennessee. And they're going to be all about preservation. So we have to be essentially whatever they say, because it's their land. And they're going, you know, their whole purpose, the whole reason they're getting this land, by the way, I probably didn't tell you this, this is a gift to the state of Tennessee from the American Battlefield Trust. They give the 125 acres, but you've got to agree to preserve it. And that's what the whole relationship's based on. They want people, when we're old and gray, you know, 1,000 years from now, to be able to go out there and learn about what happened during the war, afterwards, before, and learn about American history.
You can say that since you're the youngest person.
Yes, sir. Okay. Yes.
Would part of the plan be to set aside a section or allow people who do this kind of thing to come in and dig for relics and, you know, archaeology kind of stuff?
I highly doubt that. I can't speak for that because I'm not the state, but that's one of their things they want to preserve. And you can't preserve when people come and take relics. Although this thing has been sitting here for 150 years, I'm sure there's been plenty of relic hunters out there through the years already.
Yeah, I would just be thinking, you know, that there's cannonballs or whatever under the
I'm
ground.
sure there's still some out there, but yeah, they're not going to want to have relic hunters once this is officially a park. As, I mean, it's probably a crime. I mean, I'm sure it is. But there's other properties that aren't necessarily going to be part of this that there's likely going to be cannonballs on those areas too. I've met a couple of people who are relic hunters, and they got a lot of cool stuff they found from around here.
I was thinking.
John,
Dr. Cox.
the University of Memphis has offered an archaeological survey by their department there in Memphis. So they'll come down and survey the whole site with ground penetrating radar and other scientific methods that they use to pick up. For example, we know there was an assembly hall out there, but we don't know exactly where it was. It was near the church. Well, they'll be able to, with this radar, they'll be able to identify that particular site, and hopefully other things will come to pass in their investigation. And then following that, there'll be an interpretive plan. A team will come out, spend about 2 weeks, and study the whole site, look at the archaeological survey, and then work out a game plan for the overall appearance, what's located, where the parking lot goes, where the cannons are set up. So there's a lot of exciting things that are going to be happening over the next 3 to 5 years. That's Director Schall's plan from the Wars Commission, and we're going to try to get that going pretty soon, I hope.
Would you stand up? Look at this guy, 87 years old. Take him out.
This young man is the one that's got it done.
Oh,
I'm just
no.
sort of sitting back and applaud.
No. Anything else? Yes.
I'm vice president for United Daughters of the Confederacy, General Force Chapter 1194 in Memphis, Tennessee.
Great.
And I just want to tell you how much it warms my heart to see our Southern heritage being preserved instead of being torn down.
Well, thank you.
Because in so many cases, it's what they want to do is tear it down. So I'm proud to say thank you.
Thank you. Great organization. Of course, if you know anything about the UDC, there probably would not be a single Confederate monument out there without the UDC. Because they don't go out building new monuments these days, really for any cause. I don't think I've seen too many monuments built. We're going to try to preserve. And Dr. Cox has got a monument that he helped preserve out there at the cemetery. His ancestor was killed during the Battle of Salem, during that day, but not out at the cemetery itself, Coble, and there's a marker at Salem Cemetery to his ancestor. Pretty neat stuff.
Dr. Cox spoke to our group a few years ago
Did he?
about his book.
Yes, Dr. Cox spoke a few years ago.
We got another book coming out pretty soon.
Another book coming out, all right. That's
We're glad
great.
to come back.
Better keep them coming. Yeah, we need more books. Like we're all pro-friendly. Did you come here from Memphis? Did you come here from Memphis?
No, I live in Jackson.
Okay.
But the closest group is in Memphis.
Okay. Great. I know we got UDC. We got DAR here. SAR.
1812.
1812. SEV. I'm SEV. Anybody else? We got any Spanish America? No, War with Mexico. Is that an organization? Mexican War. Is there anybody in that one?
I had somebody in that, but
Did
I
you?
don't know if it's society.
Okay. Unfortunately, I'm from South Carolina, which means I should be in the SAR, but I think all my family would have been on the other side.
You're the black sheep of the family.
Well, honestly, if you go back and look at that war, it was the safer route. You know. But actually, all my family were German, so I don't even know if they knew what was going on.
You won't mention that when you come to speak to me.
I'm just glad it worked out for you. I mean, my family must not have been too heavily on the Tory side because I wouldn't be here. They kicked out most of them, didn't they? Didn't they kick them out? They went to Canada. They're like Nova Scotia was settled by.
A lot of them have strung up.
Actually, I do have an ancestor who was a heroine of the American Revolution. She actually carried messages to the Swamp Fox. So don't hate me. But it was actually a female. She's one of the heroines of the American Revolution. I'm also kin to Johannes Rawl. We have the same last name. If you know who he is, he's the reason we have a country. He was the Prussian at the Battle of Trenton who said that Americans would not attack on December 25th, 1776, when a guy named George Washington was about to have his whole army leave him because they hadn't won a single battle. And their enlistment was coming up at the end of the year, 1 week away. And this guy named Washington said, well, I better come up with a plan to keep my army. So he had a sneak attack across the Delaware River on Christmas night of 1776. And the Hessians in Trenton, New Jersey were awakened by cannon fire and death. And Colonel Johannes Rawl was mortally wounded. And that victory by the Americans led Washington's troops to re-enlist and believe in the cause. And y'all can thank me later. I don't know if I'm directly Ken, but I'm going to claim him anyway. All right, anything else? Let's get a little bit more local. Anything else around here besides that? If not, I really appreciate y'all coming. I'm not sure if if I've met my time requirement or not. I want to keep y'all too late or too short, but.
Well, John, I need to let you know something about this society. This society's all taken a lesson, thanks to Gwen, in dousing for graves. So maybe we can get us all out there one day and douse for some. We might find something in that 125 acres out there.
Do you know what dousing
Pardon me?
for graves is?
You might find some extra graves out there on that 100.
Okay, so you are a person that preserves graves?
No.
Is there anyone around here? Because I know somebody that does that. Volunteer work. Yes. You do it, David? Okay.
Well, yeah, I pop stones and walk
Okay.
back up out of the ground.
I've got a friend of mine who does amazing work just out of the goodness of his
You
heart.
don't know what dowsing is.
I don't, tell me. Remember, I'm a Prussian,
You know how you witch?
a Hessian.
You know how you witch for water?
Yeah.
Tell them, Gwen.
All right,
Oh,
when
with a
you-
stick?
When you douse for a grave, you take 2 pieces of metal.
Okay.
And actually, when you're walking in a cemetery, you don't have to worry about electricity or anything. And as you're walking, if you hit a grave, the rods will cross, believe it or not. And they will cross, if they cross to, got the 2 rods, if it crosses to the right is a male in the grave. If it crosses to the left, you think I'm a witch, yes I am. If it crosses to the left, it's a female in the grave. You start at the head of the grave, it will cross, you know, whichever way, and when you hit the end of the body, it will open up. And so you can tell that it's a infant. And everybody here will testify that it really does work.
Not gonna fight you. I agree. I believe in you. We don't need that archaeological from the University of Memphis after all. Save some money. It works, huh?
It works.
It works, and ground penetrating radar just reinforces what you found with the dowsing rod.
Okay. Well, that's good news. I mean, I'm serious. Good to hear. I think all of our forefathers, foremothers should be honored if they've got a gravesite. Leave that alone.
Well, I will tell you, we learned it through the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Did
They
you?
are who taught us how to do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Unless anybody else has more questions, what a way to end it. I really appreciate the opportunity to come. John Rawl, again, is my name. The organization is the Friends of Salem Cemetery Historic Site. Our brochure has all the information you need. And our website is salemcemetery.org. Bookmark it. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
John, we appreciate you coming, and having been a good friend of Malcolm Wilcox's, I know that he would be really appreciative of the work that y'all have done too. Is there anybody here that got to go to the Riverside Cemetery walking tours that the SCV did back in the early and mid 1990s? Yeah, Joel, I know you were there, yeah. Joel, can you remember Malcolm Wilcox portraying General Alexander Campbell?
Oh, yeah.
And all the way across Riverside Cemetery, you could hear, "Charge them black-hearted Yankees!" And everybody knew right where Malcolm was in his portrayal of Alexander Campbell, because you could hear him all the way to downtown Jackson every time he charged the Hornet's Nest at Shiloh. So we appreciate the work that y'all are doing from Salem Cemetery. And I will say that even though Starla, I think, was the only one that said she knew she had a relative buried at Salem, I'm right in the middle of reading Kevin McCann's book about Adam Huntsman, and chances are a lot of us are kin to Adam Huntsman and just didn't really realize it, because I think he left children scattered all over the family. Remember, we do need to put together a nominating committee. If anybody is willing to serve on that, please see me afterwards. If you have not already signed in for the sign-in register over here, please make sure you do that before you leave. Yes, Elaine?
I just want to make a reminder that we're still giving away the bicentennial books. I brought them at the last, maybe not the last one.
And that's why I've got a few over there, if anybody else
Got them up front.
needs
So
one.
if you've not gotten one yet, or if you've got a grandchild or a child, please, you should pick them up.
Please take them. They are, and they're really well done. I appreciate the work that y'all put into those, especially Kevin. Anything else? In that case, I guess we're done for the, yes, David.
Next month, Jimmy Gordon Boone is going to speak on genealogy, getting started. If you know somebody who wants to start out doing genealogy work, it'd be a really good time to bring somebody, kind of give them
Yeah, I know all of us in here know somebody that keeps saying, I've always wanted to do that, I just don't know how. I've always wanted, I just don't know where to start. Well, next month is the time to bring them. So we'd like to see several people here next month who have been saying for years they want to get started in genealogy, and Jamie will help get them on the right track moving in that direction. Make sure you pick up your quarterlies from Sandra. She has them back here. Steve, we appreciate the work that you put into them every time. And if we have nothing else, I suppose we're done for the evening.